How's it going?
Hi there. You all right? Thanks for joining us.
No worries, no worries.
That's
Good to see you.
amazing. Uh, so, where where are you? You're in the Netherlands, uh, doing amazing stuff at the weekend. Are you now in quarantine?
No, I'm in Belgium now, so I've been out here for the last few weeks, and that's where I'm going to be all winter, really. So I went from the Netherlands back to Belgium, and there's no quarantine between those countries. So
So I suppose big gatherings are cancelled for Christmas anyway. So
yeah, it's going to be a bit different. Yeah, like I'm not going to see my mum and dad for a good 4 or 5 months because just with the quarantine issue. As soon as I go home, that's it. 2 weeks, you've got to quarantine, and as soon as they come out, it's the same thing. So, yeah, it'll be a bit different at Christmas. Like I had Christmas at home last year, so it'll be a bit different.
okay. Well, that's not great, but cyclocross is good. So at least you can get the best out of it.
Oh
So
yeah, I'm not complaining at all.
yeah. So on cyclocross and it being good, one of the things we're struggling with, I think, here is for me, cyclocross is about being at the races and seeing people and so on. And our kids race cyclocross, and they do their event. They're done. We do our races, and while we're doing that, they're making mud balls and playing and everything. And cyclocross is just this big, huge party, which we're kind of missing now a bit. But is that how you got into off-road racing?
Yeah, of course. It's to be honest, what I remember most from cyclocross racing wasn't exactly the results or anything like that. It was just the whole experience from the day. So yeah, turning up and watching other people race, then getting nervous for yourself doing it, and then once your race is done, then that's the day you can just go and muck about, and you've already got your bikes there, and there's lots of bankings and stuff to play on. So actually, yeah, that definitely when I was under 12, under 14, that was the best part. All your mates were there, so it was yeah, I do yeah, it was good fun.
But you were still nervous before the races, even when you were little.
Yeah, of course. Like, well, yeah, nervous, but not in a big world way. Just literally like nervous because you want to get a good start and then you want to do your best, and because yeah, it matters. And when you're 12 and you want to show how good you are, it matters. But looking back, it didn't really matter that much. I was still just having fun.
Yeah, but surely it was more nerve-wracking then than now. You're experienced now.
Yeah, it's a bit different. There's things on the line now, whereas back then it wasn't actually that important. But it's good that you're nervous because it means that you care. So
Yeah. Sticking with kids and cyclocross, so my kids are well into their cyclocross, and I asked my 12-year-old if he got a question for you. And as well as cyclocross, he likes eating, and his question is, and I quote verbatim, um, do you have snacks? And if so, what are they?
yeah, the life of a cyclist is snacks. Don't let anyone tell you any different. Snacks, peanut butter. It goes well with everything. Toast, so that's a pretty big staple. Dried fruit as well. For some reason, just hits the spot for me. So yeah, through the day, dried fruit and nuts and stuff gets me going really well. And then more kind of naughty stuff like chocolate spread. Just man, I could go through jars and jars of that a week, but I don't. I have a bit of restraint.
Oh, I'm glad you said something normal at the end there. If it was all peanut butter and dried fruit, my kids would be heartbroken. So you've been doing cross and mountain biking for ages, but to many people, you just kind of sprung up. So we've been from a few years ago. We saw the Tullets and Tom Pidcock come to prominence, Evie Richards being world champion, and you've just kind of crept up on us. So have you always been up there in races, or has it come to you gradually?
It's been like step by step. Yeah, it's always just been little steps. At a Scottish level, I was always quite near the front. I think my skills did a lot of the talking then, like in under 12, under 14, and under 16. And then I did my first national when I was under 16, so fairly late to be honest. And then just yeah, started working through. When I was junior, I pretty much raced the whole national season. And then as a second year junior, I went to Belgium for the first time and got my head kicked in. But to be honest, it was a real turning point of seeing like this is the headroom here. This is where things could go, and that was super. It was super motivating for me seeing what the progression could look like, because racing in the UK is one thing, and for me it was oh yeah, an awesome time of learning how to race at the front and stuff. But the difference between the UK and Belgium is big in lots of good ways and bad ways. So when I went and started racing in Belgium, yeah, there were just so many more opportunities, and I saw it as an opportunity to learn. So that was a big step up, and then just over the last few years, I've just been kind of honing my skills and experiences and stuff, and just as things have naturally progressed, it means I've been at the front of races a bit more often. It's never like there was no click, like magic moment. It was lots of small considered steps that have led to me now, getting a medal at European Champs, which wasn't really expected. But when you look back, you realize I was doing the right things to put myself in that position. So yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah, we'll get on to the European Champs in a minute. But so when you first went over to Belgium, I think it was Zonhoven, which was the first race you went over to, and then you've done well in the Koppenbergcross just recently, and you've done well in the Druvencross, and these are all courses that there's nothing like that in the UK. So and you've had a few years working your way through them, and so how can a British rider, a young rider, prepare for going over there and doing these things? They just need to get over there as soon as possible, and maybe we should be trying to have races a bit more like that in the UK.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is only so much you can do because you can't replicate everything. So for me, all it was just entering that first race, planning those logistics, and just getting out there and then seeing where we were. And for me, that was going to Zonhoven, which in hindsight maybe wasn't the best idea, but maybe actually it was a good thing. Right in at the deep end, learn as much as possible. The race result didn't matter. And then next time it could only get better. The course would only be easier. I'd have one more race under me. So yeah, I think my best advice would be to just try and get stuck in. Ask as many people as possible who have done it before, because it's great. We're starting to have this kind of group of riders who have all been there and done that. So for me, I was looking up to guys like Tom Pidcock and the Paul Milnes guys who'd been out before, and the guys from Yorkshire. So I had messaged them about what do I need, what don't I need. Like we brought the full what works, like the power washer, all of that, and realized actually that's one thing you probably didn't need on a dry weekend because it's all there. Just little things really, and like around like how to enter the races and how to get around the races. And once you're there, it clicks quite quickly. You realize, right, this is kind of how they do it, and it's just little things that are different to the UK. But in terms of the racing itself, as long as you go there with the right mindset, you'll come back with a lot of good things learned.
Okay, so get out there. That's the key. So okay. You've been gradually working your way through the ranks, but suddenly you seem to me, take a big leap forward at the Koppenbergcross this year. And in every lap, we could see your head bobbing up the hill while the camera's still on it. And the camera only ever follows the people at the front of a race. So for in the Koppenbergcross, you could be on the telly the whole way. I mean, that was absolutely amazing. And as I see you there, we're going, oh, he's ahead of Tom Newson. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, the Koppenberg is tough, isn't it? And at the very beginning, you could see Felipe Orts was on the front going up there. And we thought, well, we're not going to see a lot of him later in the race then. It just blows you away, doesn't it? And those last couple of laps, it looked like they were tough.
Yeah, I definitely had that experience of, and I've never raced it before, and now I know that it's a pretty unrelenting course. As soon as you go into the red, there's just no time to recover. So on a course, actually comparing it, I've only done 2 cross races this season, but comparing it to Europeans was almost the exact opposite. You needed to push against the course to actually make progress. Whereas at Koppenberg, everything is against you. The terrain, the wind, the climbing, everything. You have to take it and then give some. So yeah, that was basically the story. I didn't pace it quite right and then paid for it quite a lot. I think if I'd done that at Europeans, you wouldn't have seen quite as big of an explosion, because you can technically kind of ride around a flat course, whereas just riding around Koppenberg, it takes a huge amount of effort.
I mean, I think people think it's the Koppenberg, that's really hard, but that's just half the story, isn't it? There's nowhere to recover. And we don't have a lot of races in the UK are on at sports grounds and parks. But this is just a cow field, and it's so bumpy, isn't it?
Yeah. And actually, yeah, if there wasn't any poles there, you'd think, why would you race around this? But and almost without the crowds, it makes it quite clinical. Because with the crowds, that's the whole point of Koppenberg. It's this kind of mythical race. But yeah, definitely the Parker makes it. And I was chatting to a friend in the week, and we were saying about how Koppenberg is like a mountain bike race, but less fun. Like it's all suffering and not as much enjoyment, which in itself is its own thing to enjoy, actually.
So, okay, but then, that was a breakthrough. And then we weren't expecting the next weekend, the European Championships, and, absolutely amazing. Third place there. I suppose you're getting fed up. Well, maybe you're not getting fed up with people saying, what's that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, I've chatted to people about it, and Koppenberg is just, like everyone's saying that Koppenberg is just an anomaly. Like, it's so hard to compare results from Koppenberg to a normal cross race. And so that's kind of what I had in the back of my head. I had good legs at Koppenberg, and yeah, I was getting stuck in, and overall the body felt good. So I knew that, and I was racing with guys that, yeah, I'd taken a step up, definitely. So looking at a U23 race only, I had a few names in my head, like Pim Ronnar and these guys like Mace Hendrick, mostly the Dutch guys. And so I had some ideas, but going into it, I thought there were about maybe 4 or 5 of us who were kind of gunning for that last spot on the podium. And that's the stuff you overthink. But once the racing gets ahead, it doesn't matter who's in the front. It could be Van der Poel, it could be Ryan Camp. You just you do your race as if it's a local league, really. Even though it's got this fancy name, European Champs, once that goes, it all goes out the window. So yeah, the race just went out well, and the legs kind of delivered, and then I kind of did the rest.
Yeah, well, no, it was an amazing performance, and so we thought you were the fastest over the barriers, maybe the bunny hopping. What I thought was interesting was that the people who were bunny hopping and weren't bunny hopping, just moving briefly into the senior race, Lars van der Haar was the one who was bossing the bunny hops. And Isabit was struggling a bit, and so it was for people watching, it was interesting to see how fast the bunny hops were going. And the other important bit of the course, just from watching it on TV, was the sand.
Yeah.
And while you were bossing the bunny hops, it looked as though Thomas May maybe had the legs on you in the sand, and so there was a little bit of toing and froing, and it looked as though you were, although you were gaining time on the bunny hops, he was gaining a bit more on the sand. So you were playing this catch-up game the whole time, and that must have been tough.
That is definitely how it felt in the race. So it's on a course like that with such small margins, as in it's little milliseconds at each corner. So it's really tight racing. The sections where it makes a difference, you feel them. So for example, if you can't ride or run in the sand particularly well, if that turns into 5-10 bike lengths, that can take a whole lap to close. Whereas if you compare that to maybe even a national course like Bradford, you can close 50 meters by getting one section right. The kind of gaps in abilities they're easy to shut. Whereas on a tight course like Europeans, the margins are really fine. And if you have a weakness, then it shows. And yeah, I was just it did feel like that I was on that catch-up game. But then with 2 laps to go, I could I showed that I can also put other people on the back foot, and the tables turned a little bit. But yeah, Thomas was running incredibly strong, and I think there's a little bit of work for me to do in terms of my short running speed, because it was literally 10-15 seconds of really intense running, but you have to really nail it, and that takes its toll really for the next. You have to recover for the next 5 minutes almost from these efforts. Sometimes it's that important.
So I mean, sometimes running is a bit of an add-on to cross riders, but certainly in the women's, we've seen Celine Del Carmen Alvarado won at Rutherford and also the Europeans by attacking on the running in many ways. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that in these really tight races, it can just come down to those few extra strides on the sand.
Yeah. Whereas if you have like a really muddy race, everyone's absolutely blown their doors anyway, so they're all kind of running at the same speed. Whereas these fast, tight races, it makes the difference if you can really have a good run, because those sections are few and far between. There are only 2 sand sections, and those really were making the difference.
So just getting back to the catching up, you were saying, so on a course like this, you wouldn't just lose a bit of ground and then sprint back up to everyone. That wasn't possible.
Yeah.
It's you thinking, right, I'll give myself another half lap or so to gradually work your way up.
Yeah, it was yeah, you can kind of gauge it quite well. I don't know, on the courses where you zigzag a lot, you can see your competitors all the time, so you can get an idea of how things are moving. So at one point, Ryan Camp and Pim Ronar were really pushing on the front, but I could actually see that I was staying the same distance to them. It was the guys in between who were coming back to me. So you can kind of gauge it, and it's lots of little efforts, obviously. So they all add up into this one big race effort. Like the lap was like 7 minutes. And within that, there must have been 30, 40 sprints, which really take its toll. So it is like obviously it's a 50-minute long time trial, but with key sections in between.
Going to people who are listening and what they can learn from you, you know, your bunny hopping was sublime, and we've said that it's becoming more and more important in racing. With, you know, Van der Haar has even learned now. Is this something I heard actually in Ireland? They don't let young kids bunny hop the barriers in the races. They have marshals there, and they say, no, you've got to get off for that. But from my point of view, you know, should be encouraging people to, you know, be bunny hopping, you know, from an early age. I mean, when did you first start hopping the barriers?
I think, to be honest, it was almost the same. It wasn't encouraged really for me when I was under 12 and stuff, and when I started doing cyclocross racing, they would usually not actually put barriers in, and if they did, yeah, they would discourage bunny hopping. And I think it was they had good intentions to make sure that people weren't injuring themselves and using bad technique. And actually, at training sessions with a guy called Keith Stocker, who does all of the kind of Scottish race stuff, we were definitely told to learn proper running technique before bunny hopping, because whether you're a good bunny hopper or not, you're always going to need to know great dismounting technique and remounting technique, because that happens more in cyclocross than hurdles necessarily. So it was definitely secondary that we learned how to bunny hop. And yeah, it was every year I have to relearn how to bunny hop. The hurdles in at Europeans, that was the first time I bunny hopped for like whatever since February. So in practice, I had to psych myself up, do a few rounds, and I think I did them 6 times in practice, and just session them, because I'd basically lost my confidence over the summer. Because everyone needs to build that up, and you see it at the first race with the pros. You come around on practice, and there's about 15 full-time pro cyclocross riders standing there looking at the barriers going, these look quite big this weekend and stuff like that. It's just because they're out of practice, but come mid-season, everyone's hopping the barriers like they're nothing. I had to kind of re-get myself. But to be honest, the ones at Europeans were quite good. They were the main thing is the ground was really predictable. It was dead flat, grassy sand. That's the biggest thing. It was predictable every lap, no mud, no footprints really. So that makes a big difference to the hurdles.
I mean, it's testament to how ingrained the skill is that you can just rock up at the first race and learn again. I mean, amateurs will be practicing all year and then stuff it up at the first race. So no, it's interesting.
You want to turn up to the race with some confidence. That's ideal, because there's nothing worse than I watched back my coverage, and there's a Slovakian guy who decks it on the second hurdle, which you never want to do in a race, because it's not good for the confidence. It's like anything. If you mess up a section, it can take a while to get that back. So definitely practicing at home with lots of different sizes, different scenarios, 1 hurdle, 2 hurdles, 3 small hurdles. It's all these things will like build up your kind of bag of tricks for then you need to go in and get out in the race, because there's all these scenarios. Like there's sometimes you hop one and then you have to get off in between. You like anything can happen in the race, so you need to be ready.
Yeah, that's a really good bit of advice. You know, don't just practice exactly the same thing. They say practice makes permanent, and then you won't know how to cope with different situations. Right, so now you've got it all sussed, and you've got your bronze medal. So, you know, that's it now. Pro contract next year. Sven and Bart have been on the phone, have they already?
I wouldn't want to say, but basically. No, I'm joking. It's
all right. We get it.
Things yeah, I had my recovery spin yesterday, and it's back to normal. It's yeah, it's this it's yeah, it's more for me. It's confidence. It's the next level. But with cycling, there's always the next thing, and that's what makes it. That's what makes it. What's addictive about it? There's always a new goal, and that next goal is probably worlds for me. With lots of racing in between, I hope, in Belgium.
So you continue to move forwards, getting better and better, new challenges and so on. And unlike perhaps, I mean, I'm sure all riders have come from, from nothing to something. But we see sort of Tom Pidcock burst onto the scene and winning everything. Whereas I was thinking that maybe it's a similar way. You're similar to Anna Kay in a way, that we see you just gradually working your way through the rankings and getting better and better. But I find that, and many riders find that there's somebody you race with, and kind of have them pigeonholed as somebody who's going to beat you, and then you need to make them into somebody who you beat. And how do you get the confidence to and is it really hard work to move your way through, progressively beating more riders along the way?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would look back to last year and the start of last season, and think about the guys I was racing with there, and then this year at Koppenberg, I'm like going up the inside of Tom Moos and into corners, and it's different, but it's actually just more fun to look back at and go, right, I'm racing with these big guys. I guess I must be one of them now. And in the race, you don't think about it, but yeah, it takes a little bit of mental capacity to just aim for the next goal, and you don't want to get stuck on a plateau at all, because as I say, there's always something next thing after U23. Like, we have a massive bar set of Wout van Aert, Mathieu van der Poel, and Tom Pidcock. There's always something next. So it's about little steps towards big goals, because you don't want to put yourself off by saying I want to win this in this. You need to focus on the little bits in between as well.
Okay, so you're coming up the inside of a corner with Tom Newson, like you said, and from racing local leagues in the UK, I suppose people have got to go and do their day job the next day, and if they turn up and they've broken their arm, they've got to make some excuses, and maybe it's a bit more tentative. Whereas in my limited experience in Belgium, it's not quite as non-contact as it's supposed to be. And as you move further up and you start encountering people like Tom Newson, we won't use any names. Does it become a bit more contact, or does mutual respect kick in and you're all these pros going about their business?
Definitely when I went out to Belgium, I realized, right, this is a little bit more cutthroat. You don't get much respect, especially like at junior, and then in like when I was a first year U23, that's when they changed the rules so that Super Prestige was just all elite. So as an 18-year-old, I was straight in there with Van der Poel and then 100 other guys in between, which was, there's a lot going on really. And you can spend the whole race literally just fighting for a position, fighting for your right to be there. And that's what you've got to remember. You have just as much right to be fighting for those positions as the next guy. You've put in all the work to get here. So you should take those opportunities, and now there is a little bit of mutual respect, but our job is to race for the win, and everyone has that same job. And that, like, I was riding around with Thomas Mean in the last 2 laps, and I don't think I ever thought about like what if we take each other out. I was never like we were racing for the medals, and we were also actually catching Ryan Camp. So I think, for me anyway, I don't know what he was thinking, but I was relatively cutthroat. I wasn't just going to let my fellow countrymen, win this race. And the Belgians will think the exact same when you've got Tunex chasing down his countrymen. Obviously, there's the whole team dynamic and stuff, which has made the race a little bit more interesting, I guess. But it changes a little bit in this big pool of like U23 and junior. The kind of the riders who make progress from there, they've all been through the same stuff, so there's a bit of mutual respect there.
But you've obviously got a bit of a knack for scything your way through fields, though. I guess we met, we first chatted at the National Championships in Shrewsbury in January, and I was at the back of the grid, and you must have had an awful start, because I was running along and realised people were shouting Cameron and you were behind me.
Yeah, I crashed on the long off camber on the start, which was the worst possible point.
So then, but more impressive than me getting past you was that from being behind me, you then got through to second place. So which calls into question some people. It's all about the grid position, and the grid list goes up on Facebook, and then oh, my race is over. And then Van der Poel comes from the back at Coxsider to win. You can get through fields like this. What's the secret? How do you deal mentally and tactically with being in that terrible position in a race?
I think firstly, it's never an ideal situation. I'm never like, oh yeah, now I need to make up lots of places. It's not best case scenario, and that's something I've been working on really, is that 1 minute power and that kind of start line speed, because any advantage you can get is a good thing. And especially at a course like Euros, I don't know if you saw how it was literally just lined out, and every position takes a huge amount of effort. You can't just kind of roll past someone. You've got to do exactly what they're doing and then a little bit more to get past. So it makes a big difference. But in the case that, you do have a bad, like Rie crashed at the start, which I got a little bit caught up in, and your pre-ride comes into it a little bit. So scouting out alternate line choices on courses where it just seems like one lovely line all the way through, there are always other options, and especially on the first lap, those other options might be faster. So in the sand, the B rut, where you ride for a bit and then get off, might be quicker than the A rut where everyone's crashed. Little things like that on like really steep up ramps, you'll probably find that they'll not be able to ride it in a bunch of 20. So there's always these other options, and if you do a few of them each lap, that could be maybe 10 places. Same at Shrewsbury, there were options where the normal kind of standard line seems the fastest, maybe when you're on your own, but it's a different story when you're all absolutely gunning for it and making mistakes and hitting poles. That secondary line might actually work for you in that first lap. And it is a little bit about instincts as well, and sometimes those instincts don't pay off. You see it with Van der Poel. Well, you see it with lots of riders. They go for that first line, like first lap move, and it doesn't pay off, and then they're known as the guy who took the wrong line and then paid for it. But you learn, and but you just have to take those opportunities, because if you take it doesn't work, then it means next week you'll make a better choice.
Oh, well, yeah, really good advice. I'll have to try it. So you're giving all your tricks away now. They're all the youngsters will be coming up behind you now, and they'll have listened to this.
I hope so.
So the very tenuous link between dealing mentally with being behind in the race. What about lockdown? So if you go on social media, everybody's finding lockdown lovely, and they've decided to buy chickens, and they've rejoined with nature, and they're going on long walks in the autumn and so on. But then there's the other half of people like me who are finding it really difficult, with the lack of racing and uncertainty, and how do you stay focused on your training and things like that. So one thing I saw, you've been bike packing. Was this good? Is that good training? And how else have you been dealing with lockdown?
Yeah, for the bike packing, I wouldn't technically, no, it's not good training, but there's more to being a good bike rider than always being good at training. It's about the long term. It's about the mental game and all of that. And in my opinion, bike packing worked for me. It was a way of disconnecting from the racing and from the training and giving that mental break. It definitely wasn't a physical break, which I paid for a little bit, but it's just weighing up what you want to gain from it. And I know my year was quite strange. I raced all the way up until February flat out in Cyclocross, and the virus literally didn't affect a single Cyclocross race last year, even though it was kind of coming to prominence. I then had my off-season break just as everything went crazy, and then I started my off season. I guess it wouldn't usually be an off season, but it was because there was no racing, and I found the kind of lack of distractions really quite productive, because my head was set on the next Cyclocross season anyway, and I would just kept telling myself the racing will come back soon. If I can be a better version of myself when that does happen, then that's a big tick in my box. And I managed to, tick off lots of exciting things in the summer, even without my normal things like road racing and mountain biking and stuff. So it was just that little shift of goals, really, finding new things to focus on, new things to learn. Like I got a lot out of bettering myself physically this summer, and seeing positive numbers and ticking off big training blocks and stuff. And I got something out of that, but it doesn't have to be as scientific as that. I got just as much enjoyment out of the Capital Trail, which I did was a off-road bikepacking loop that we did in one day. And I can look back on my summer and be really happy that I just went and did that, because it was a really great experience. And there's lots of little wins that you can get. I think that's important with this lockdown is, these big normal goals maybe have been snatched away totally out of our control, but that doesn't stop you using that mental energy for something else, like learning new skills or bettering yourself, doing something that you've wanted to do for a while, like learning to bunny hop, or learning how, like, I'm actually going to fix that little leg that pops up when I remount the bike, because there's so many people who just flick that leg up when they're I don't know, little things like that can just, you can look back and go, right, I did something productive.
I suppose for you, you've just because there was an under-23 race at the Europeans, but not a junior race. So you've been in many ways very lucky that you've been able to sort of prove yourself on the world stage. Whereas people who were maybe did a load of training and then were hoping to prove themselves on the national stage, it's not happened for. But then you've given some good advice there about how, you've just got to shift your objectives to doing some massive trail.
And I think, and that uncertainty was always there. Like, as we got closer to the cross season and that second wave was kind of coming, there was that kind of feeling of, oh my goodness, this has been 7 months or 6 months in the making, and it might not even happen. And at that point, you have to, control everything you can control. And then after there, then find out what you can focus on next, because it's not very nice getting told that it's the same for everyone, because it's never the same for everyone. It's always your own little thing. And I was chatting to Corin Carrick-Anderson, one of the juniors who planned this whole Belgian block, and then it all just kind of fizzles away. And I look back to when a few years ago when I was doing all of that, and it must be incredibly frustrating. But he's also focusing on his next goals. He's moving up to U23. He's still got junior next year in mountain bike, and that's something that he can look forward to, and he's already training for that. Not absolutely going all balls out, but it's more mentally just training with a purpose, because the racing will return.
And what about for you? What are your objectives for the rest of the season, assuming that the racing does continue on the
continent? Just take week by week. I think this season is showing that you can't take anything for granted. Hopefully we'll be racing in a few weeks and all of that. I think Belgium are pretty set on putting the races ahead, so that's a positive. And then the next level of that is to build on this momentum. I think we're only 2 races in, which I feel like I've been in Belgium for months already, which I don't know if is a good thing, but I am only 2 races in, so there's a lot more to do, with the goal at the end of the season being world champs, because that is another one that really matters.
So does your training program need to be a bit more agile then? Because you can't bank everything on the world champs, because, the world champs might not happen. Or so are you always thinking, well, next race could be my last race? Or is that not the way?
A little bit. Like, I came into the season with a lot better fitness than last year, but it's hard to come into a cyclocross season absolutely pinging, because there's just a lot of unknowns. Like, there's still unknowns about getting into each race because of certain restrictions and COVID tests and all of the other factors that aren't normally there. So with training it can be a little bit hard, but being flexible and knowing your body and knowing how you will react. I think most of the pro peloton at the moment in World Tour as well, it is a balancing of act of that uncertainty, but then you're also dealing with a physical body that changes. And some people you saw with Van der Poel, those first few races, he was just totally off it. His body just wasn't used to it. And it took him that whole period of racing to really ride into his form. And some people are like that. And then you get some people who are with like Wout van Aert, who can just train and get everything out in training and then turn up to race 100%. So yeah, you have to like know your own body and stuff like that. But yeah, it is different, and yeah, week by week, it is week by week and day by day. You can't really put a pin in a calendar and go, right, I'm going to be at 100% form then, because there's a lot that can happen.
Okay, so well, we're nearing the end now. That's some amazing advice that you've come up with as I've been chatting with you. I'm gonna go back and watch this again and pay much more attention, because I've been trying to think of what to say at the same time. And you should always listen more than you speak, but I feel I've got to speak here as well. But fantastic. But finally, you're in the upper echelons of elite racing now. Do you have a fan club yet?
I do have a fan club, on Twitter and Instagram, I think, and they are very, very supportive. So they're doing their job.
So will they next year be at races with the banners like all the Belgian fan clubs?
I hope so, because then at that point I can say that I've made it. I know, Abby last year, someone brought her a personalized cushion. So that's kind of the level of supporting that can happen, is you get a personalized cushion given to you at the camper. So the passionate people are out there.
Wow. Right. Okay. Well, we'll look you up, and hopefully you'll get an influx of fans from this. But anyway, so yeah, thanks again for chatting. Amazing performance in the European Championships. I'm sure there'll be loads more to come. And yeah, well, good luck. Take care.
Thanks for having me.